Well, I want to focus on Dublin 12 and my constituency, but I think many of these issues impact certainly on the constituencies that border ours and right beside ours. And the Minister has been in before to hear me talk about Skull Column, which is now going to be opened as Our Lady of Hope, which as a special school, and I think that has given some hope to parents. But the reality is that there is still an undersupply of special schools, and this is creating a need for, this is pushing more and more children into special ASD classes, and you hear reports being written saying that the child needs a special class, not a special school, because there is no special school available. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the children are losing out because they're not getting the correct educational placement they need. So what you have then is children who should be in a special school aren't getting a special school, their need for a special school isn't being registered, and they're taking up spaces in special classes, creating overly long waiting lists. And certainly in Dublin 12, there's an added burden because established schools in Dublin 4 and Dublin 6 aren't being forced to provide ASD classes as other schools have been by the department. So you have children who are in Dublin 4 and Dublin 6 who are completely undersupplied with ASD special classes being pushed into Dublin 12, increasing the waiting lists in Dublin 12, and then you have children being pushed from Dublin 12 over to Dublin 24. And all the problems with school transport that we just heard a minute ago are affecting these kids as well. And these are kids who have, who have need of stability and special classes, who have need of stability and predictability, and really the system as it is set up is just not serving them, and they are losing out.
Deputy Neil Richmond.
Gurmalgat Lascan Corda, would I just like to start by thanking the Minister sincerely for coming in. And much what I have to say is very complimentary to what Deputy Costello had to say, but it's actually coming at it from a slightly different angle. And the issue I primarily want to raise is regarding AIM staff for children with ASD in early years education and in the very start of their national school education. Minister, for a Montessori school to take on a child with ASD, they require AIM staff who have further qualifications than most childcare workers to work one-on-one with the child. It is obviously crucial for children with ASD to attend Montessori, preschool and early stages of mainstream education, socialise and get used to a school and communal environment, as it is important for their families, parents and guardians. However, many childcare providers and national schools are forced to turn away children with autism as they simply do not have the staff to care for them. One of the big reasons for this is that the remuneration for AMI staff is simply not high enough. Currently, AIM staff are paid €14 an hour, which works out at approximately €10.85 post-tax. This is simply not enough to attract sufficient talent to early years Montessori schools and senior and junior infant schools across Dublin. The result of this is that providers are forced to turn away children with autism, leaving them and their families stuck and out of options as they cannot use their existing staff to work with children. This is simply unfair on so many reasons. For so many reasons. Children with autism have every right to childcare and an education as any other child, particularly in the early years and in the initial years of a national school education. These barriers to entry for children with autism will only seek to disadvantage them as they progress through the national school system. In my own area of Dublin Éireann, there have been a family of 2 young children with autism who have been rejected from 6 childcare providers due to a lack of staff, and at this stage, as they prepare to enter junior infants next September, they are unsure and unable to assess what national school will be able to accept them at this stage.
Minister.
And thank you to the deputies. I would like to thank the deputies for raising the issue, as it gives me an opportunity to outline the current position regarding provision for children with special education needs, including autism. With regard to some of the points raised, I just would like to make the point that the NCSE works with the local CINO and works with children, with the families of children, so as to ensure that the most suitable school placement and the necessary supports for a student are put in place. Enabling children with special educational needs to receive an education appropriate to their needs is a priority. Children with special educational needs should receive their education in placements which are appropriate to their needs alongside their peers wherever possible, unless such an approach would be inconsistent with the best interests of the individual child or other children. This inclusive approach is consistent with the provisions of the Education for Persons in Special Education Needs of the EPSN Act 2004. This policy is supported by significant investment by this government. The state will spend approximately $2 billion, or just under 25% of the entire education budget in 2021, on making additional provision for children with special education needs this year. The National Council for Special Education, the NCSE, has particular responsibility for coordinating and advising on the education provision for children nationwide. It has well-established structures in place for engaging with schools and parents. The NCSE seeks to ensure that schools in an area can, between them, cater for all children who have been identified as needing special education placements. There are planning processes in place at both local and national levels to ensure that the required number of specialist education places come on stream to meet identified need in a timely fashion. Normally, schools are very willing to respond to the emerging needs in their areas. However, where a shortage of places is identified, the Department of Education works closely with the NCSE and the schools in the area to expand provision to meet local need. This collaboration works well, and I want to acknowledge that in many of the schools that have been provided to date, it has been a result of very strong collaboration and engagement of all of the what are termed, I suppose, really the partners in education, the parents and the schools themselves in making that provision possible. As we speak, the NCSE is working with a significant number of families and schools to secure suitable placements for children with special education needs. This is important work, and I can assure the deputies that it is a priority for all concerned, and we will continue to work hand in hand with the partners in education to ensure that the individual needs of individual children are met in the appropriate environment, whether that's in a special class or in a special school or whatever is the recognised and the appropriate need for the student in question. In relation to some of the points that have already been raised by the deputies, I want to acknowledge in terms of early years, that is not within my domain, but I take the point that the deputy raises in terms of the need to have the appropriately trained staff, and in terms of allocation of staff within our school setting, we have significant progress being made in terms of allocation of SNAs in our schools. We're at a significantly high level of over 18,000 in terms of special education teachers. Again, there's a record high level, and equally so in terms of staff who have particular expertise in working with children with additional needs and children with autism. So, and again, the acknowledgement that there's over 1/5 of the budget that has been expended, and rightly so, in the area of special education. Thank you.
Minister. Deputy Costello.
Thank you very much, Minister. I did actually want to raise the similar issue of the early years provision as well. I was saving it for my follow-up. One of the families that I'm trying to do my best to support in the constituency has a challenge with the Early Start programme, which is part of the Department of Education, where they have a child who has a diagnosis of ASD, and they're being told that there are no SNAs available in Early Start. If your child is going through the Early Start programme, you do not get an SNA, even if you have a diagnosis, and that's not good enough. And again, the collaboration you're talking about, certainly from where I stand on the ground, it doesn't seem to be working very well. As I say, we have a domino effect of children being bussed out of their own communities into other communities, and this knock-on effect that ultimately means that because some areas are not providing or being forced to provide the ASD classes that they should be, other areas and other children are suffering.
Thank you, Deputy Richmond.
And may I thank the Minister for the fulsome reply. And I suppose in the supplementary Lascan Corla, what I'd ask of the Minister is for yourself and Minister Madigan to collaborate with Minister O'Gorman to see where there is a quite clear need for overlap. When we have early diagnosis and early intervention, children are not getting the support they need in order to allow them enter mainstream education in the best possible way prepared. That's why we need to see support for AMI workers in the early childhood private sector, but equally we need to see early childhood services, Montessori schools and creches provided with the opportunities to expand and have the appropriate spaces. I know a lot of this doesn't directly fall under your purview, Minister, but it's something that will feed straight into the national school system at a very early stage, and if we can have those supports provided to the children and equally to their families at the earliest point of view, it will allow for a far better educational process for all the children involved.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, to conclude.
Yeah, thank you. Just to reiterate, I do appreciate the points that are being made by the deputies, and I do want to acknowledge that there is a very positive and proactive view being taken within the Department of Education, to advance provision and appropriate provision for children with additional needs, and that is something that we are hugely committed to. I think, and I've referenced it already, even in terms of the budget, the acknowledgement that 1/5 of our budget now is in the entirety of the Department of Education is to be expended on special education. I think itself is a, if you like, a vote of intent in terms of our determination and our absolute determination to deliver in the area of special education, and both Minister Madigan and I are fully committed to that. Specifically in terms of points that have been raised in terms of provision of specific classes in various areas throughout the country, I want to confirm that, for example, all new bills will specifically have the provision for special classes going forward. That is something that we have put in place to ensure that we meet the needs going forward. Notwithstanding that as well, I suppose there's an acknowledgement that in terms of the provision of additional classes, we are at a record high in terms of the provision of additional classes, but that's not to say that there isn't a considerable ground still to cover going forward, and we are committed to doing that. In relation to the specific case that has been raised by the Deputy earlier, if he wants to bring that, those details to my attention, I'm very happy to take that from the Deputy and to get my officials to follow up on it.